All right, back for another show. Today I've got Mike Murphy, Associate Athletic Director for Communications and Marketing at University of New Hampshire. How's it going, Mike?
Andrew, it's going great. Happy summer. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I definitely think you probably were impressed with that backflip, though.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I'm impressed to be in this kind of studio with the bright lights. Your name, first and foremost. I'll definitely follow the social media account. So it's a special day for me. I'm not going to lie.
Yes, you've made it. You've made it. No, thanks for joining me. We met a few years back when I was up visiting the campus and just kind of getting the podcast back going. I need to knock the rust off, so I can get back to some regular shows out here. But love connecting with people. I loved chatting with you when I was up at the university and checking out the campus. I mean, it's a beautiful campus up there.
Yes, if anybody needs any proof of that, take our word for it. But I think visiting would be great as well this time of year, and then the fall. It's really outstanding. It's right next to the ocean. We're a few miles away from the Atlantic Ocean. We're less than an hour from the mountains for those like to hike and think about New Hampshire, and also very close to Boston. It's not the boondocks that you might think of, as it's a little bit quaint, but not really rural. Portsmouth, New Hampshire is really close by, and it's a really, really exciting place to be athletic-wise, in addition to just calling it home and a place to work.
Yeah, it looked like a cool area. I flew into Boston, drove up. It was in the fall, so the trees and down here in Florida, you don't really get the trees changing much, and fall and spring you kind of miss. But it was really cool, and even the beach, looks a little different than the beach down here, but it's right along the water. I really enjoyed the few days I spent there. But talk to us. You've been at the university for a while, but kind of talk to us about your journey along the way. Like, how did you get to where you are today? Where'd you get your start? Kind of walk us through your career.
Yeah, dumb luck is the short answer, Andrew. But I went to college at Syracuse University back in the dark ages of the 1990s. Essentially, at that time, it was I wanted to be the next big broadcaster, like so many sportscasters come out of Syracuse. And that goes back to when I was in 8th grade, and I knew I could no longer play sports. I thought I was going to be this great baseball player, but I couldn't even make the Cal Ripken League or whatever it was at the time. Connecticut. But I remember talking to my father about, well, what do I do? And he suggested, you can get paid to watch sports. There are people who have jobs like this, and that was my obsession. And we settled on the broadcast side. Well, the guys I'm watching do the Mets and Yankees broadcasts and the Knicks and the Rangers, they all went to college somewhere and learned this. And so I quickly looked up some of the names, saw Syracuse University pop up time and again, and that's where I decided to go to school. Great 4 years, really enjoyed it. And, in the mid-'90s, you could still actually come out of college and be, hey, I could be a broadcaster. I'm going to go to the big leagues. Well, the place that hired me was a small radio station in Concord, New Hampshire. And I'd never been to New Hampshire in my life, and I pronounced the name of the capital wrong in my resume tape. I called it Concord. And yet my boss looked past all that, brought me in for the whopping sum of $13,000 a year. I was hired the day before my wedding. Imagine this. I'm 2 weeks out of college. I asked my bride to be less than 24 hours from getting married in Naperville, Illinois. Do you want to move to Concord, New Hampshire for $13,000 a year? Good news is I make double that now. It's been many, many years. But that's how I came to New Hampshire. And then as you're around, dumb luck comes into it. The sports director at the radio station, who knew I was a sports nut, he was also the voice of UNH, men's basketball, football. The general manager, the owner of the station, was the voice of UNH men's hockey. So just by happenstance, this one radio station had so many connections to a school I admit I didn't know even existed at the Division I level. But those guys were mentors. They brought me in, and it was a slow process. I didn't go straight from the radio station to UNH. Instead, minor league baseball came to New Hampshire, and this is years later. 1995, I graduate, start living in New Hampshire. 8 years, right? You keep thinking you're going to get that break, go somewhere else, and yet here I am still in New Hampshire, settling down, having children, liking the area. But this minor league baseball team moved from New Haven, Connecticut to Manchester, New Hampshire, 25 minutes from where I live. And the general manager of the team was a Syracuse TA when I was a student.
Oh,
Did he
wow.
remember me? No. Did I pretend he should? Yes. And it helped my resume get near the top. Even
Yeah.
that wasn't enough. The radio station I worked at, I and my partner Bob Lippman, who still broadcasts Fisher Cats games to this day, we convinced station management, wouldn't it be great if we were the flagship home of this brand new baseball team? It's good for business. And that's what got us on the air. There's probably 1,000 tapes that were better, and yet we were the ones doing the games when they came along in 2004. Worked there a couple years later when my radio career ended, and learned as you know, the minor league sports cycle. So different than just putting on a headset and broadcasting. You're making cold calls. Some cases you're putting on the mascot costume. You're pulling out the tarp, and you're learning about the industry. And I learned a lot about media relations and promotion and sales in my long tenure with the Fisher Cats. But in and around that, I was broadcasting these UNH games. Football, men's basketball, women's basketball came on board, then some hockey. Say yes to everything, Andrew. And when a job opening came up on the communication side in 2010, that's when I came over here.
When you were doing your broadcast stuff, were you primarily like the play-by-play, or were you doing the color commentating, or did you do both?
Sure. With baseball, you split, unless you're the New York Yankees, right, where John Sterling does every inning and Susan Waldman does color. But I was doing a lot of play-by-play, high school basketball play-by-play. At UNH, I was the color commentator because Jim Janot, the name I didn't give you earlier, he was the sports director from the radio station I worked at. And he's the one who gave me the original opening. His color commentator for football had to leave mid-season in 1998. And he knew I was at the radio station every day doing this talk show, doing the morning sports. He goes, hey, how about you start driving with me? You be the second voice. It's a lot different. I used to say, Andrew, I never played the game, but I wouldn't have made that play. But you have to be different. You're not describing all the action. But it was a way in. And I always wanted to be the voice of UNH football or voice of UNH basketball. None of that came to fruition, but hockey did. Many years later, a sport I knew least about, and people who listen to me would agree with that, probably even now. But that's the first chance to be the voice of a team was UNH men's hockey. And so I do play-by-play even now, in and around my job, I have that. Otherwise, it was a lot of color commentary for UNH athletics.
Well, if you weren't that familiar with hockey, how did you overcome that? I mean, I guess you just had to have some good charm and
yes, charm was the
other stuff.
Luckily, what's funny about being a team announcer, in my opinion, is people who work with you tend to like you. Not everybody, but fans will be more forgiving to the voice of their team because it's a familiar voice. If you came out of nowhere and put Mike Murphy on the air, people are like, well, what's so special about him? But if you show up week after week and you call big games and you're there, they get used to you. Then they meet you and there's some kind
of personality. It's like, they get.
Yeah. And so that helped. And reps, hopefully I got better along the way because it is a fast-paced sport and I really fell in love with the sport and I love the pace of it. But I think people get used to your voice. You're more forgiven for the mistakes you have because they associate you, part of branding, with you.
You're the team. Yeah. Yeah, you're part of the crew. So how did that transition into kind of your current role and when you got into the university full time?
Sure. I was lucky that I was hired into college athletics. A friend of mine, Tom Wilkins, who's now at Southern New Hampshire University, he had the position of associate athletic director for communications, brought me in from minor league baseball. And there's a lot I had to learn about college sports. It's a lot different than even minor league. So he was patient with me. The staff was patient with me. And I was able to cut my teeth and go along from being the football SID. I learned gymnastics and skiing. I was doing sports I didn't know even existed. So you spend a lot of time learning that side of the business. And then as things evolve, there's more responsibilities. People leave. You get promoted if you're fortunate, and you have managers who support you and supervisors who believe in you. And I've been lucky to have that. And so the role I have now came along during COVID. We had someone depart who we had an associate athletic director for communications. That was me. And an associate athletic director for marketing who left for another job. So rather than search for a brand new associate athletic director, I talked with my supervisor at the time and said, why don't we merge the two? A lot like the minor league baseball philosophy. Yeah. John Haines, who was in that world, he liked to blend the two. And so we did. We put it under one umbrella, marketing communications. And that also includes our vast broadcasts, Wildcat Sports Productions, which is really a huge part of what we do, where most of our resources tend to go, is investing more and more on the broadcast side of the house.
Are you involved in the broadcast for any of the sports now? Still?
Overseeing it, sure.
Okay.
Do I broadcast on TV? Very infrequently. I mean, there are times I did color commentary when we had a contract with NBC Sports Boston for football. That was a really big deal for us to be on the same TV station as the Boston Celtics. It branched out. But, you know, with ESPN Plus doing all of our basketballs and now our hockeys, you have to bring other people in. You know, finding the next announcers, the young and up and comers. I take pride in helping them and finding people who have got on to bigger things in the industry. And I really enjoy that part of it too. And glad to give advice, but I was never one who wanted to be on. I shouldn't say never, but when I made my decision to come to UNH in 2010, I put a lot of the broadcast stuff behind. Ironically, that's how I got in. I owe a lot to what I do to my voice, but the reality was to go higher in my profession, I had to step aside. Sometimes I'm still called out of the bullpen to broadcast things, and radio is still a passion. But on the TV side, we have so many decisions we have to make. There's so much infrastructure. I try to bring in, and I have been successful, knock on wood, in bringing in great people who understand what I don't in terms of quality of production, investing in the right material, building out control rooms so that we can put a great in-arena show on our video boards in addition to an ESPN broadcast. So it's been a learning experience, but really a rewarding one too, to be on that side of it instead of just somebody whose voice is familiar.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, like one of the things you kind of talked about throughout your journey is something that I talk about a lot on the show. And that is the importance of relationships and, you know, building that, and just even your connection with the Syracuse connection. I mean, and I tell everyone when I'm talking to young kids, you know, in school or coming out of school, you know, your internships, your, you know, volunteer work, all that stuff, do the best of your ability and put the best effort forth, because you never know where things will shake out in the future. And had you not had a good reputation at Syracuse within the program, that could have easily derailed you, because your contact from Syracuse, you know, has similar contacts. So, and then just building your career when you find somebody that, you know, meets what you're looking for and has the right work ethic and the drive, you're always going to have those opportunities, because people are going to continue to progress up, and they're going to bring the people with them that they feel are going to help continue to drive them and drive each other. So I think it's really cool to see how intertwined your journey has been based on relationships and your effort.
I'll give you an example, Andrew, because you're right. Relationships, I said dumb luck, but sometimes you have to be prepared when the opportunities come up. I often tell the story. The reason I got hired at UNH is because of a hockey game in St. Lawrence, which is upstate New York, on a Sunday in 2008. The regular play-by-play announcer had something else going on. So they asked me, are you willing to go to New York State and do this game? Yes, of course. I'll drive, whatever. And it was a long drive from New Hampshire to, you know, New York didn't seem that far. But because they were afraid, the management at UNH, they were afraid I might fall asleep on the drive. They insisted that Tom Wilkins, the hockey SID, ride with me in the car. You talk a lot over 12 to 13 hours back and forth about where you are in your career, visions, dreams. And he was aspiring to eventually take over the department, which he did 2 years later. And that conversation, how close we became, really helped give me a leg up when maybe there were more experienced people there. He gave me the chance because he knew what I was made of. And, you know, 3 years later, he moved on to a different school for an opportunity, and I was promoted. So all because of a car ride. I remember the year because the Rays and the Phillies were playing in the World Series. So that's why I remember the 2008 part of it. So it took 2 years for that to even come to fruition, but you never know. And that's why if you're a young person, you reach out to someone like you or me or someone even you don't know, more often than not, people in the business want to help you in some way, shape, or form. Maybe they know somebody. Maybe they're just flattered you reached out to them. And you never know when they have an opening or know of an opening. And that's happened a lot in my career where maybe I didn't have something specific, but I knew of somebody else and happy to forward along a resume or for a broadcast or a reel. And, it's nice when they reach out to you years later and you're still contacts.
Yeah, and I've noticed too. I mean, some places don't even post some openings. It's referral based, or so. I mean, I just think it's great to network and build those relationships. And I mean, it's important to, I think, get real life experience. And I think now with technology, it's probably a lot easier for someone coming out of school wanting to go into broadcasting than it was when you came out in the mid to late 90s.
Well, in terms of, there's more opportunity for sure. Everything is being broadcast at all divisions, but you have to be so multifaceted now. I never would have dreamed of having a social media presence or recording myself with my phone, right? And that stuff, and being able to edit video or write a blog and then do press releases and get out there and be creative on TikTok. None of that would have resonated with 1995 Mike Murphy. So the people who come out of college now, what can you do? How are you on social media? What does it mean to be good on social media? These are things I have a difficult time wrapping my head around, because every year social media changes, and the farther along I get age-wise, the more disconnected I am from what the audience recruits. Right. College-age kids who want to follow our brand. I'm not the best person to make a lot of those choices, so I have to find people who are, and then try to understand them like parents try to understand their kids.
Right. It's very difficult, but you're right though. And that you have to surround yourself with people who have, stronger skills than you do in certain areas. I mean, that's how you build a good team. I just think with like podcasts and there's so many opportunities for people to go out and, get experience and build up some demos and whatnot. But in this day and age, you really need to be able to wear multiple hats, and what else can you do and what else can you help with? I was looking at something that over the past few months, and I equate like sports, minor league sports, major league sports, and even colleges now. It's like they need to become content creators almost, because of the way that consumers are consuming, video and just entertainment. And it's a whole new opportunity, I think, for teams, for universities to monetize, a whole new stream. How do you guys approach, that kind of stuff at the university now? Like, do you guys do coaches shows, or do you guys have, university podcasts, things like that?
Sure. Traditional media, when I started here, traditional media was still the king of what we did. Hey, make sure you have press credentials for the newspapers who come over. And when the TV station comes over, we do weekly press conferences. We've seen, we don't need to really tell that tale of how newspaper and local TV and radio are falling by the wayside. We have to produce our own content. We have to be our own media creators. So we've done a number of things. Pre-COVID, there was a coach's show every week. We'd go to a local restaurant, and football coach or hockey coach or student athletes, it was a good touch point, and fans would come, but it'd be the same fans, very important people. And yet that Monday night became difficult to do. And then after COVID, you had to be more creative. So things like this, where it's audio on a podcast. We have the UNH Wildcats, a 5-star podcast, where we talk to student athletes, coaches, alum, and I've been fortunate to host that. I also hosted the coaches show. We do smaller clips, video content that we can use in our broadcast. As I said, we do ESPN for men's basketball, women's basketball, men's hockey, women's soccer, women's soccer, so on and so forth, volleyball as well. Every time you're on, you can reach a potential audience member. So how do you multi-purpose an article that's a blog post by our UNH insider, a quick interview that you can cut up for social media or do more long form on YouTube? We're getting prepared to introduce we already did a press conference to introduce our new men's basketball coach, Nathan Davis, but coming up shortly here in the summer, we're going to do a Zoom, right? Zoom is a way of life where people can log on for free, watch, hey, meet the staff. It isn't necessarily a barbecue in person. We do that as well with some sports, but it's something on a 7:00 on a Tuesday night in July. People can, boom, log in, type in their question and have contact. So it's trying to be
Wow,
creative,
cool.
find ways to, get your word out.
It's almost like a little town hall or something. Is that kind of what that is? Fans can ask the coach or whoever questions and
Exactly. So you do some things that hit your most loyal audience. We have a men's hockey season ticket barbecue we do every summer where they come, have burgers, dogs, meet the players because they're here for summer school. This basketball version, right, you and I could just jump on, and it is just getting to know personalities of brand new people. But there's also, radio broadcasts. I'm a big fan of radio. That's where you get casual people. Saturday afternoon football game is on. You may be hitting seek, and all of a sudden there's a game, and UNH is on. You listen, and in the midst of that, you may hear a commercial or a halftime interview about come out to next week's game. Tickets are available. Hey, don't forget, basketball is around the corner. Hockey's around the corner. Big win for our field hockey team today. That's your chance to spread your message to the sound of the voice, right? Chances are people who find you on the radio are within driving distance to buy a ticket to a game, and getting people to show up for your ticketed events is ultimately one of the huge goals. Not the only goal, but it's
Right.
a huge goal.
Do you guys have an app, or have there been any discussions on creating a athletics department, app for fans?
We don't currently have an active app. That we've had them in the past, and we used it for such things as student rewards for checking in at games.
Okay.
And we do bring it up every year. And you know what it is, Andrew? With our staff, it's not a huge staff,
Yeah.
right? As you hear, you tighten up and you have to be multifaceted. To do an app correctly, like have somebody monitoring everything about it, we need that person.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to just put an app out there and then not monitor, not utilize it properly. So we're going in that direction. When exactly it'll happen, not 2023, 24 academic year, but we all see how the trends are going. You want your website to be fresh. You need your social media channels to be appealing, but getting an app has to be a big part of it. So when people walk into your venue, everything is at their fingertips.
Yeah. And I think what's helped with maybe not needing the app as pressing, like that's helped, teams and universities kind of delay that, are how advanced the websites are now, because the websites pretty much are functioning almost like an app in a lot of ways. And, they're a lot more mobile friendly now, and, it's easy to navigate. So, but yeah, you're right. When you have that app, you're going to need, another full-time staffer and, a lot of other pieces. One of the things you mentioned was the big differences between, minor league sports and, the university. Can you talk a little bit about, those differences that you've, seen, the good and the bad?
Sure. Minor league, again, you and I come out of the minor league world. We know what it's like to be lower rung and working your way up. So whenever I see somebody who has minor league baseball on their resume and we're in it more than 1 year, I said, there's somebody who understands what it's like to put in a grind. Because I loved it, and I was able to broadcast games and travel around, but I saw Binghamton, New York, and Erie, Pennsylvania enough at my age. But again, the day-to-day, like getting there at 8:30 in the morning and having a boss saying, where are your sales calls? Then finally getting to 7 o'clock for the game and being able to breathe and really enjoy it, leaving 11:30 and then doing it the next day. It's tough to replicate that in the college scene. We work long hours in college. My family will tell you they don't see a lot of me between the months of September and March, but it's a different speed. And the college thing, you don't live and die. That's harsh. But vicariously, the results on the field mean so much more than a minor league baseball game, dare I say. Minor league baseball, the rule was, hey, what a great time. I got a hot dog. I got a pennant. Oh,
Yeah. It's about the experience.
and
right?
you don't care who won the game.
Yeah.
But UNH football, when we lose on a Saturday, walking into the office Monday, we're kind of, oh, man. But when soccer gets a big win, or hockey or anything else, you love it because you see the same kids. The kids from freshman year through senior, they want to be there. Oftentimes, you get kids who are intern with you, or you help them for because they're all want to be Wildcats. And that's really a big part of why I love the college sports scene. It's like a mini Olympic village where one day you're talking to the track coach, the next day the volleyball coach is coming in. And I try to go to a lot of events. I don't go to everyone, but I'll do public address announcing at a field hockey game, then go broadcast hockey that night, and just love that there's some people, the team kind of likes me being around, I think, or at least they lie to me and say I do. And that's enough for me to feel good about it.
No, I think that's it definitely a lot of differences there. I would think though, and just being an outsider looking at the university side is like, how do you keep up with so many teams and events? Like, do you have a pretty big team that works with you on the communications and marketing side?
We're not a big team, but we're a really good team.
Okay.
So the people who, so I, on the communication side, I work with the football team. My relationship with football goes back 25 years, going back to the radio. But in terms of being their primary contact, the head coach, Rick Santos, I was here every game he played in the mid 2000s.
Okay.
And yet I have a secondary, Doug Poole. Doug has been here longer than I have. Like he graduated from UNH. The two of us just have a pacing together. I don't want to quite say Stockton Malone because that'll go over the heads of your younger audience, but that works in football. But Doug is also the guy who's been doing field hockey since the 90s, women's lacrosse, women's hockey. And I know I can trust him to be the leader there. I have Jim Roble with men's soccer, men's hockey. He oversees our internship program. And then there's younger people just who have gone through our internship program, Callie Sear and Jared Manassian, who we were able to give entry-level jobs to, and they work with, Callie works with women's basketball, women's soccer, Jared men's basketball, volleyball. So together on the communication side, you have to have people who are invested, the primary person to talk to coaches and athletes, because one person, as much as you'd like to do it all, you can't be, you want to be available, you want to be accessible to all of them and have at least a working knowledge, but I'm bad with names. I forget names of the athletes as much as I'd like to remember them. And I watch a lot of games, but in reality, you have to have a good team in order to accomplish that stuff. And that's just on the communication side. Marketing, Wildcat Productions, you need even better people.
Well, that's what I was going to say is, so like, I mean, the communication side of it, just having all those, teams, and now you added, marketing on top of that. And, how do you not lose your mind when you got all that, it's got to be tough because on the marketing, what kind of things do you oversee there? Is that more on the production and graphics? Does it include like advertising and, marketing towards, revenue generation, things as well?
Yes, we have to touch all of it. So Matthew La Rochelle is our director of marketing and fan engagement. He's been with us a little under a year now, a New Hampshire guy, but he worked at the college level and also worked in minor league sports, came to us from Lehigh Valley hockey. And he's got a passion for in arena. Ben Meadows, who came to us from Denver and worked for the Avalanche and in arena shows for Stanley Cup champion. Next thing you know, his wife gets a job in New Hampshire. Lo and behold, we have an opening, and we have this guy with this kind of experience.
Wow, that's awesome.
And he and Dylan Hand, who likes the broadcast side and also a UNH grad, they are the experts in the subject matter. I work with them, but I don't want to micromanage and tell them do this, do this, do this. But we also want to make sure we don't forget what we're here for. We do need to get promotions for football and men's hockey are two big revenue generators, but we have to give gymnastics and women's hockey and the basketballs love because there's also tickets there. Communications, you have to pay attention to skiing and swimming and diving too, even though there's not a single dollar that we can raise from it. Those student athletes are some of our best stories. Those teams are among our most successful. And it's really unique that we have those sports too. But from the marketing side, you really have to keep your revenue generating sports at the front of mind.
Yeah. And I do think like you're talking about some of the talent and things on the non-revenue generating sports. I mean, that can help from a marketing standpoint, get the university extra exposure or notoriety through the communication side. So definitely think that's I think they go hand in hand, but you don't see a lot of times that combined. So I think that's pretty cool that you're over that and get to have that. I don't know. I love marketing, and I'm not the best communicator, so that would be great. But no, it's cool to see, and again, the facilities that the university has there, I thought were amazing. I mean, the hockey arena, that's a great venue, and I haven't lived up in the northeast further than Pennsylvania, but hockey is very prominent at the university, and how is that different than, a lot of the other universities out there?
Yeah, the brand of hockey is huge at UNH. And even going back to what you said about the arena, when people think about UNH athletics, I think far and wide, if they know us nationally, they remember UNH hockey. If they're regionally, they certainly remember UNH hockey. I live about 35, 40 miles from campus. So people here in the capital, Concord, they'll still say to me sometimes, boy, it must be impossible to get a ticket to see hockey. Because we have this reputation of selling out every game. I got news. We're not there now. And I want people to realize it's a great value. You should come out, enjoy it. But we're not sold out, and there's no waiting list. There's people who remember that from the late 90s, early 2000s. UNH never won a national championship, but played in the finals a couple of times. 1999, we lost to our arch rival, Maine, and we played that game in Anaheim, California, lost in overtime. Heartbreak. Can't even talk about that. Sorry, because our head coach was on that team. And in 2003, we lost to Minnesota. But you say something about the arena. It is a great arena, but it's showing its age. And others are building new venues. Other schools are investing in hockey that weren't a generation ago. And you're looking around and seeing what Penn State is doing. Now Arizona State's investing. And we have to try to keep up with them. So getting investments to get better behind the curtain aspects to the hockey arena, better locker room, a workout facility, what other a player lounge, study area, because there's so much time that your women's and men's hockey players spend in the arena that you want them to be able to do all the other stuff that makes them student athletes. We recently, as of last year, changed the ice surface. We had to replace the ice making anyway, so we took that opportunity to build the dimensions to more of a pro style NHL rink. Because figure this one out, Andrew, back in the mid 90s, it was let's make the ice level big like they do for Olympic hockey, because that was the style.
Yeah.
But as you go along, you realize people recruit against you by saying, well, if you want to play in the NHL, why are you going to New Hampshire where they have the Olympic size rink? So we've adjusted that, still have the great campus and the history, but you're constantly trying to fix your facilities. Wildcat Stadium was a football stadium, and soccer opened up in 2016. You have a brand new track being built as we speak. So during the summertime, when people come back in the fall, the track will be the UNH colors, and that just adds to the ambiance of the place. There's a soccer lacrosse facility that's in the midst of a campaign. We have the pitch itself, but getting the press box and getting a video board, you just need more and more investment and people to really fund you, because the state's not going to say, here's a blank check, we'll build new facilities and keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah, no, it's got to be challenging. Are you involved in any aspects of that from, trying to raise funds for any, projects like that?
On the communications end, occasionally my opinion will be asked, but it's mostly, okay, I'll meet with people, decision makers. Hey, we're planning this event, or we need to get ready to write this in case this gift comes through.
Right.
And I'll do a lot of the writing and come up with quotes and go back and forth with either my boss or the advancement team. But nobody really works in a silo, to borrow a coined phrase that's overused. I'm so lucky to be involved in so many different areas, whether it's talking to people who make decisions about tailgating, or talking to people who make decisions about our concessions, or in this case, the fundraising, which is such a huge aspect of what you have to do. But I'm not a decision maker in that way. I give my opinions. Sometimes they take them, sometimes they don't. But just having a seat at the table opens my eyes to how impressive it is what is going on a daily basis from people who work at UNH.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot going on behind the scenes that nobody ever knows about, and you're there to communicate that message when it happens. What would you say to anyone coming out of college now that's looking to get into broadcasting or communications? Any advice that you would give them?
Do something else. No. Who am I to burst those bubbles? No, I think, I hate to say, well, I don't hate to say it, but really you have to be understanding that there's dues to be paid. You may not walk in and be the lead voice of Purdue or Iowa or Big Ten school. You might only be the backup public address announcer for an Olympic sport. but get in somewhere where you are. How can I help? How can I get involved? Be noticed, show up, do a good job, and then get more opportunities. If you're only doing it because, hey, this pays that much, what do you mean I got to work nights and weekends? It's not going to work for you. You have to be willing to swallow pride a little bit. Try to say yes to about everything without putting your health or your family at risk.
Yeah.
Yes to everything else, and just be a part of whatever it can be. And then you'd be surprised. My story is just one, but opportunities will arrive for you. And if you're ready, when opportunity meets preparedness, that's when success is the end goal.
Well, I think, they need to be realistic too. I don't know if it's coming out of COVID. It seems like the mindset has changed a lot as far as the expectation of some of the students, as far as like, oh, I'm not going to start at 70,000 a year. And I've encountered it quite a bit since COVID. But I think, realistically, I mean, again, this was, a few years back for you. You mentioned your first gig was $13K a year. But it was, the experience and getting in there, and you're making at least double now. So you're good. But,
exactly. And here's the other thing. Sometimes, and I get it's easy to email 100 schools. My name is Mike Murphy, and I'm a great broadcaster. Here's my reel. I'm the lead this. Do you have any full-time availability? Full-time jobs? The answer is going to be no, probably, right? In fact, sometimes they're applying for the job I have, which is fantastic.
Right.
I think one thing that's been successful, and it's not anything I created, but I've heard people say this, reach out to someone, an Andrew Haines, a Mike Murphy, the person in your neighborhood. Hey, do you have 10 minutes to talk with me about what your career is like? And then inevitably during that conversation, I'm going to flip it around and say, so where do you go to school? What's your story? What do you want to do? And just by having that relationship, say, oh, thanks so much for your time. Is there anybody else I could talk to? And it sounds like it's work, and it is work to build up a network, but by not asking for something other than a few minutes of time, even to let egotistical guys like me brag about, look what I used to do, Dr. Rick, nobody cares. But if they give you that time, you at least create relationships. There's people I talk to who I've never offered anything to and never had a reason to, but they're still in my mind in case, because they have open maybe once every year, maybe twice a year, they'll reach out, and just enough that it's worth the time, because one of those is going to hit. And it costs you nothing other than time.
It's like, how do you differentiate yourself, right? When you have 100 or 200 resumes come in, and a lot of times that could be a difference maker. And for me, it shows somebody is taking some initiative. They're going above and beyond because they want to, better themselves, or learn from other people. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's great advice. And I get emails on LinkedIn, often about that, and try to jump on calls as often as I can. Everyone started somewhere. So,
and we feel good when somebody we talk to gets an opportunity, right? If somebody you happen to connect to some other school because a colleague has a need and you help fulfill that need, that's somebody who you've helped, even if it doesn't help you or your university.
Yeah. A couple university questions that I got. Number one is who are your sports teams that you root for?
New York sports fan, which has really not worked well up here in Boston country. But I grew up, back in my day, there was no interleague baseball. So cheering for the Mets and Yankees and going to the game, whoever was home, was a deal. And I grew up an hour from New York City. Jets, so I chose the wrong football team. Could have been a Giants fan, had some success. Knicks and Rangers. So a lot of heartache, but those are my pro teams. Syracuse is my college team after UNH. So that's my sports fandom.
Is baseball your prime sport, or what's your main sport that you like?
Not anymore. Baseball used to be. I loved it. And maybe it's because I got out of it that I don't enjoy it as much, but I think a lot of the rules changes were meant to bring people back into the fold like me, who were not really enjoying the pace of play, the length of games,
yes, and
the shift. So I'm starting to creep back a little bit, but I no longer get that, oh, wow, the Yankees are playing the Red Sox tonight at 7. I have to make sure I'm watching that. Right. That doesn't happen. Football still does that for me.
Okay.
Football still, I got to be watching. When the Jets are 1-15, I got to be watching that 15th loss,
Is this the year for the Jets or what?
This is the year for the Jets. My wife is a Packers fan, and this is the second time in our marriage that the Packers have given us a quarterback. We'll see. It didn't work so well with Brett Favre, but I think the Aaron Rodgers connection is going to pay dividends here.
I mean, it could be. I mean, this could be a good year for him. So, I mean, we'll have to wait and see. So New York fans. I grew up liking the Knicks. I'm from Lancaster, PA, so Central PA. My aunt lives in New York City, so I would go to Knicks games back when John Starks and Patrick Ewing and all those guys would play. So that was my team.
I'm a fan of Lancaster, PA, by the way. Give me some Amish restaurants.
I love food, and that's a good segue to give us some of your top food spots. You know, either where you live, because I think you mentioned you live about 30 minutes away, or on campus, around campus. What's your go-to?
I don't want to forget this because I talked about Amish. Sarasota, Florida, Yoder's Restaurant, unbelievable food. There's an Amish population down there. We go to Sarasota once a year, and it's like my happy spot. But you have to eat at Yoder's.
I've heard that. I live St. Pete Beach, so I'm like right by. I mean, I can see Bradenton, which is right next to Sarasota. I've had multiple people tell me about that place, so I'm gonna have to try that.
Yes. If you don't, shame on you, Andrew. Shame on you.
How about
those looking for New Hampshire connections?
Yeah.
On campus, I'm a big fan of Polly's Pockets, which I like falafel. I like gyros. I like chicken. They put on a thing called the turbo, and they make the turbo. It's all three, and it is unbelievable. It's right there downtown. A place called Hop and Grind is fancy hamburgers. Sometimes if it's a veggie burger or chicken, but it's hamburger inspired. And then in New Hampshire, off campus, same ownership as Hop and Grind. My favorite steak place, the Tuckaway Tavern in Raymond, New Hampshire, bar none. My favorite restaurant.
It's like a nice dinner place, or is it?
It's nice steaks.
Nice. Okay.
Unbelievable steaks. Great place to go dinner. Be prepared to wait a while.
Okay.
True story. One time the way my wife and I would do it, I'd have to time, hey, let's go have dinner at Tuckaway. But I know there's going to be a 45-minute wait. So let's leave now, and then I'll try to get our name in, and you have to wait. They don't let you put your name in and leave. But I found one seat at the bar. And again, at the bar, it's the same menu. So I sat at the bar next to someone else. My wife hadn't arrived yet. The guy next to me was getting ready to check out. And I said, excuse me, sir, can I buy you a drink just to stay in this seat? Because behind us, there's a line of people waiting for any seat to open up. So I bought this guy a drink, talked to him just to stall enough for my wife to arrive and take that seat so we could have dinner.
Okay, now she's here. You can leave. See ya.
Exactly. He knew the gig was up. He was like, oh, yeah, I'll be happy to. And he ordered a nice, expensive drink, not just a Bud Light, you know?
Yeah, that's good. When I came up, I went to Manchester and ate at a Brazilian steakhouse. I love Brazilian steakhouses, so I was like, I'll have to try this. And it was pretty good.
On Hanover Street? Was it Gaucho's on Hanover Street?
Yeah. Yeah.
Food and most New Hampshire places, I've been to many establishments, and I think it's an underrated food state. Anybody can reach out for that.
Yeah.
Always ask a fat guy where he eats, so I am a good audience for that.
Oh man, I could eat. I'm talking about it's almost lunchtime, so I gotta. That's the first thing I think about when I wake up is where am I going to lunch today?
Tomorrow you're going to Yoder's. You're gonna get a peanut butter pie at the end of it, and you're gonna thank me.
I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna try to go there in the next month. So I'm gonna check that out. Mike, it's been good reconnecting with you. Thanks for coming on the show. Make sure you share this. We need to get. We need to hit that 10 or 11 listeners for this show. So help me reach that. All right.
Double the audience. Looks like I doubled my salary from 1995. You got it, Andrew.
It's perfect. Yeah. It's perfect. No, thanks again. And let's stay in touch.
Thanks, Andrew.